Well, ahead of this particular debate, which is set to happen this afternoon, is also expected to appear between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m., just 2 hours to defend himself. Perhaps will be something similar to what we saw last night, could be different. We'll wait to see on that. So let me introduce my panel this morning. Joining me on set, on my immediate right, I'm joined by George Ngaira, who's a governance analyst. Thank you very much, George, for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me, Cynthia.
Karibu sana. Next to him is Wycliffe Alutalala, who's a political analyst. Good to have you back, Alutalala.
Thank you.
Right, and the lady on set is Joyce Omahue, who's a political analyst as well. Thank you very much, Joyce.
Thank you, welcome.
All right, so ladies, gentlemen, before we get this conversation started, allow us to just listen into something that the Deputy President spoke on as he was winding at that particular press briefing on why he will not resign from office and he will fight to the end. Let's listen into that first.
I called this press conference. There was a lot of speculation that Rigathi Gachagua wants to resign. This is a man elected by 7.2 million Kenyans. How dare you suggest to him that he can do so without public participation? I have no intention whatsoever to resign from this job. I'll fight to the end. I have tremendous respect for our judiciary and the professional judges of the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court, and in the professional manner they have handled serious issues affecting Kenya. The impeachment of a deputy president elected by 7.2 million Kenyans is not a small matter that can hastily be decided by a few members of parliament and senators and wish it away. I'll submit myself to independent institutions to get justice. And I'm sure, I have no doubt in my mind that I'll get justice.
Gachagua says he's going nowhere, at least for now, because he will not resign from office and he will be fighting till the end this particular impeachment motion. Ngaira, I'd start with you. If you could read the mood of the Deputy President and the body language, yes, what was that press briefing like for you?
First of all, thank you for having me, Cynthia. It's a long time.
You're welcome.
It's the last time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua might not be, as an elected politician, might not be a seasoned politician, but as a practitioner of politics and the business of running government, he has been there for the last 30 years. He understands. He was there an administrator from the Kanu regime, and then when President Uhuru Kenyatta came in as formally as an elected politician in 2002, Rigathi Gachagua was his peer for a long time.
Right.
And throughout his entire career up until he became president, Rigathi Gachagua has been with him. So in terms of the political mechanization, I mean, the engineering of politics is not a stranger. And he even sits at a much better position today because he's a deputy president of the Republic of Kenya that comes with a big stature. I've said here before and in many other stations that there are two things that if you come into politics with give you a massive advantage, and that is resources and numbers. Even a dog with enough resources and numbers might beat you in any election. You might only beat it on the eligibility because the IBC can't clear a dog. But if that dog were to have the billions that it has and the resources and the numbers that are in the mountain, you will always be ahead of the game. So Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua understands the position that he's in. He understands, and that's why he has categorically put it very clear that I am somebody who has been elected by 7.1 million people, you know, because he's an elected deputy president. And so it's just an indication of a realization of the challenge that he's facing, but has also shown the bravery that is needed to tackle such massive political challenges.
So that was brave.
Extremely brave, and then tactical as well, because he knows that the 2 hours that they were going to give him today might not be as it might not be enough for him to fully prosecute his case.
Right.
And so he went to the public, because politics, Cynthia, as it always happens, is about how you manage the public. You know, we can walk with you to an event, something that I can tell you backstage, I tell you in the masses, because objectives to get the people to understand what my position is. And he's been able to preempt any question that was going to be raised today in that session where he's supposed to present himself, and let the Kenyans decide on what has happened. And also the decision that he was going to pursue this legally to the very end gives Kenyans once again another chance to see how one can go through such a process, because it's the very first time that we are impeaching a sitting deputy president who is elected, and so it's going to be historic in many ways. So from where I sit, that's very brave, and also tactical for him as far as how he has approached this case, because it is a political process.
Right. Alutalala, for him to do this just hours before Parliament debates and votes on this particular motion, what does he hope he gets from this particular press briefing that he did last night?
Okay, just to pick from where my friend Gaira just left, I think you asked about the body language of the Deputy President in that press briefing. Now, from where I sit, I think, first of all, we need to understand what an impeachment means. Impeachment, actually, in the Kenyan context, or even in the legal terms, is a very serious process. And it is a process whose end result, if it goes against you, can permanently end your political life.
Yes.
So looking at the Deputy President yesterday and flashbacking on the Deputy President I know, this is a man who is fully aware of what is facing him and the threats associated with whatever is before him.
Threats from what quarters?
The threat of impeachment, the real threat of impeachment. He understands what the impeachment means to him and his political life, and is one man who has decided that I won't go down that easily. And for me, what the Deputy President was doing yesterday, he decided to defend himself in the public court. Perhaps, as Ngaira put it, he might have felt that the 2 hours that will be given in Parliament may not be adequate, so he decided to defend himself in the public court, which, from where I sit, has left many questions unanswered.
Right. Does it have any bearing on the session that will be in Parliament?
Of course, it has a bearing, because you see, like for us Kenyans, we saw the petition, but I can say it was an abridged version of the petition, because it was just the statement, like 11 grounds that are alleged for the removal. But now he decided to tackle those issues one by one and explain his side of the story. So what that will do is that in the minds of the MPs, they are going into this debate with a glimpse of what the Deputy President has said. So automatically, it will have an impact on their reasoning, because they now have to, at least between yesterday and that time when they will be in Parliament, they have to compare and contrast what he said and the information they have to come up with an informed position. So automatically it will have an impact.
Right. Yeah. Joyce, 291 members of Parliament signed this impeachment motion for it to be tabled. Now, looking at the accusations, the Deputy President was poking holes now into the grounds of impeachment, and we saw about 3 members of Parliament who were mentioned in that particular press briefing. Is there a likelihood that perhaps while voting for the motion, the numbers may reduce from the 291 who signed the impeachment motion?
No, true, Cynthia. Even before I go to the gist of the matter, when he decided yesterday to stand in front of the 55 million whether voting or otherwise. And going by the mood of the public participation that was held on Friday and Saturday, he wanted to demystify what the principles of public participation that was supposed to have been enacted by the August House, this is the National Assembly, but they did not do, which was a disservice to them. One, my brother Wycliffe have only mentioned the 11 grounds that were brought forth. The principles of public participation in terms of information, Article 37 of the Constitution, what was brought to the public was something new that they did not have, was not accountable, and was not substantiated. Allow me to pick only one item that he brought up, among us several others. The Olive Hotel, owned by his brother. Perhaps members of the public did not know that Olive Hotel and the beach property belonged to a sister to Cynthia, and yet Cynthia is carrying the cross for the sister.
Right.
Members of public have now been more informed than they were before on Friday. The author of this impeachment motion did not delve into the legalities of the facts, like one, giving us the CR12s for the companies that are involved. He has preempted that discussion by averring to the members of public and to the further state the facts that they did not have. The mover of this motion, if I were him, I would go back to the drawing board and revisit this discussion. Why? What he brought on board on the floor of the August House vis-a-vis what was presented last night are two different worlds altogether. If members of public were to be asked, compared to what they did, the steps they were on Friday, vis-a-vis yesterday, this is a different world. Today, Professor Ilaki, who writes in, who is a professor at the University of Nairobi, said, Kenya is a Sarakasi world. Because what you wake up, what you sleep on in the evening, and what you wake up in the morning today are two different things. So, to the authors of this, and to the movers of this motion, some of them, Cynthia, started falling sick last night. That is a technicality that they want to deploy, so that when it comes to the mounting of numbers, when we want to identify the 200 and say 300 that stood, we start now having minuses. Right. Why was it by deciding that 3 of them fell sick and were admitted in the hospital? And they made it public that they are already in hospital. So from the numbers that signed on Thursday, and the numbers today, we're starting to getting far out. Lastly, before I conclude, when the members of the same members of parliament went back now to the constituencies, and some of them, particularly from the mountain, they found it very, very tough and very, very rough. They started backtracking. On Friday and Saturday, 3 members of parliament from Nyeri County went on press and said and denounced the signatures. One of them, to conclude, said she was coerced. So the numbers, I want to answer what you said, the number that appended the signature, vis-a-vis the number that is today, will be different. Before I conclude, Cynthia, it was in the press sometime last week that some amount of money had been released to one senior Kenyan from the Kiambu County. And what reached the pockets of the signers of the votes or something else. When they decided to do the maths, the figures were not adding up. So we're also finding a lot of acrimony between the signers of that motion and the persons who will appear today. Thank you, Cynthia.
Right, Ngaira, she alludes to, that the numbers are likely to reduce from those that signed to those that may actually vote on this particular motion, which now brings to question on the credibility of members of parliament, or at least even the National Assembly on itself. Even the Deputy President himself says what he looks forward to do today might be just a circus. Begs the question, is there always an upper hand that is bearing on the parliament on the decisions that they make?
Which is tragic, because Kenyans, in their wisdom, in both constitutions, the original independence constitution, and then we had the parliamentary system, we had a prime minister, then Prime Minister Jomo Kenyatta. Right. And then obviously the transition into a presidential system over the years. And of course, with now the 2010 constitution, where now it was made very clear that the government of Kenya is made of 3 arms. Then we have the National Assembly, the executive, and the judiciary. And these institutions were meant from the very beginning to operate independently, because the House of Parliament is a representation of the opinion of the people and not the characters that are in the executive or in the judiciary. And so they're supposed to make independent choices in the interest of those who have sent them in that particular house. So the 290 constituencies. So my member of parliament, Mheshimiwa Malolo Njeni, who is my MP for Malava constituency, in whose constituency I'm a voter and he represents me in parliament, has a duty then to come to a constituency and be able to listen to what the people are saying, so that then when he goes back to parliament, he is able to do that. What Joyce has mentioned is very clear that in actual sense we have a bill that was supposed to be passed in parliament that is currently rotting in the office of the leader of the majority. Yeah. It's called the Public Participation Bill. And that bill was supposed to be able to clearly elaborate how that process was supposed to be done, so that, because the question has always been, and not necessarily on this impeachment case, but in many other matters where you hear that the court have stopped them because there was no public participation. Yeah. Yeah. And it has always been left to the leeway to the judge to determine whether what you presented to me, I feel like is enough participation. But had we had that bill gone through parliament, so that then the process is very clear, so that we can be able to define what exactly is full participation. Because I can go to 3 regions and come back and indicate that I've done public participation. But what about the other people? Because the older provincial regions that we had were about 7. There are 4 other regions that are supposed to give their feedback. And so what Rigathi has done is exactly what in 2017 Raila Odinga did with the presidential petition. Right. For the first time he proved, because Kenya will be here 100 years from today, and there will be elections in this country. And simply you might be running for presidency and somebody steal your votes. You now have a formula of how you can approach such a case. So what Rigathi Gachagua has done, and which is beautiful, is that he's given now an opportunity to define what Joyce has said, that how will I find why this public participation is supposed to be, and then what is the consequences of that. Unfortunately, to go to your question, is that the National Assembly, which then has a duty to ensure that that is actually done, so that then we have a proper bill as one of its duties, which is legislation. Then one of the bill is one of those things they ought to have done, so that they can be able to help Kenyans construe what it means by public participation. It is unfortunate that the House of the National Assembly, as you're saying, the independence of it, then hasn't proven that, and this probably is the worst parliament that we've ever had in the history of this country. This is a number of times I've heard you say that. It is, because just look at, it is the first parliament that has actually, the public went in and almost burnt it. It's never happened. There is no parliament, even the one during Nyayo's time, where the public had such anger and the confidence to go and confront members of parliament the way they did. It was historic in many ways. And remember, it was not politically, there was no Raila Odinga there who called for that Mandamano. It's Kenyans in the wisdom who felt that the country hasn't performed well, and it was on live TV at midday. That's the best time to confront an enemy. True. Not at night. If you really want to know somebody hates you, it's not the one who waits at night when they are asleep. No, he comes in broad daylight and says, Cynthia, I disagree with what you're saying. Right. Kenyans have shown that. So it's an indication that the National Assembly is being obtrusive from elsewhere, because I think that's what you're alluding with the question. It is true and unfortunate that you have a president who wants to micromanage institutions. And the National Assembly is not one of those institutions that is supposed to micromanage. The members of parliament and the senators in the National Assembly have a constitutional duty. There's something that people do not understand. The National Assembly and the judiciary are not employees of President William Ruto. Presidents come and go, and they leave civil servants there to continue serving Kenyans, because those are employees of the Kenyans. My father worked for government for 35 years. Those are 4 presidents, almost 5 presidents. If you start from 1979, just before President Kenyatta died, he had gotten a small job somewhere. He was a public servant. And so he did that because he was not Jomo's employee. He has never been Jomo's employee. He was an employee of the people of Kenya. And so the people in such a situation likely would be, even as we try to teach this parliament a lesson, because it hasn't yet understood. Because even what they've done in this question of impeachment, you can see, it's just a political obsession to be able to take through Rigathi Gachagua through a political process, but they've not quite spoken to the people, and that's why he has alluded to Deputy President Gachagua. And I'm not a fan of Gachagua. Cynthia, you know that. I didn't even vote for him. But you see, he's a human being who deserves a fair process. True. And is a Kenyan. That's why for somebody like me who's been a student of law, and I've been to court, I know sometimes when allegations are made to the public gallery, everybody can easily buy it off the cuff. But it is when we are given a platform now to a court of law in a fair system, we tell, now come and defend your allegations, that's where the truths begin to come out. Rigathi Gachagua has been in public life since he was a quantity surveyor at the National Housing Corporation. He's made his wealth over a period of 30, maybe 40 years. The Olive Gardens Hotel and the other properties that they were mentioning, I don't know much about the other ones, because gross violation of the Constitution is a general aggregation. How do you quantify it, that you've grossly violated it? The only tangible case that they had would have been these sorts of properties, where they can say you had 800 million this time, you have 5 billion this time, you didn't have these properties, now you have them. Validate your wealth. That is not the case, because those properties are public knowledge. That property has been there for years. This was a tactical move, and I pray that the National Assembly, which then has the cardinal duty to remain independent, begins to open up its eyes and go back to its senses, so that we can have a parliament that is not controlled from anywhere.
Right. Alutalala, in the exact words of the Deputy President, he said the public participation that was conducted was a shoddy exercise and did not meet the threshold. One might argue he has already preempted what may occur ahead, considering that the tyranny of numbers at the National Assembly do not favor him. So there's a possibility that perhaps, the 2/3 threshold may be met at the National Assembly. And so he's already poked holes on whether or not the public participation done was up to par, and whether or not he has got a bargaining ground at the corridors of court if it gets to the courts.
First of all, before I come to the issue of the threshold, let me first of all answer my brother here, Ngaira. It is very wrong to compare the current National Assembly with the parliament that we had in 1992 during Moi's days. Number two, it is also very naive to say that the way we are conducting ourselves politically today in 2024 is the same way my late MP Martin Shikuku could do in 1992. We are living in a digital era. We have a new constitution. We have a more enlightened society that you cannot compare anywhere near what we had in 1992 when we were doing multi-party politics. So saying that the current parliament is the worst, to me, is not a very fair comparison, given the times that we are living in.
Where would you rate it at then?
Yeah, it is not the worst.
Which is the worst one?
And I don't think we have a worst parliament, because all the parliaments that have existed have done, if you go to the records, they have done their work. What we are only saying is that currently the era that we are living in is very different, and it has even made our thinking to be different.
Right.
There are things that we are doing today that we could not do in 1992, during Moi's days. Even this thing that is now talking about, like, for example, going to parliament, you couldn't do it in 1992, and we have been in this town from those years. So what we just need to do is that we need to stick to the current issues. And if you were to ask me, when the Deputy President talks about the public participation did not mean the threshold.
Yes.
What threshold is he talking about? You see, you cannot defend yourself today with a law that does not exist. Mr. Ngaira says the public participation bill is lying at the office of the majority leader, meaning it has not been passed. So whatever is going to happen is going to happen as per the current law and the current procedures.
So from where you sit, did the public participation that we saw on Friday and Saturday, was it effective public participation?
It was effective because the Constitution talks about having public participation. What is public participation? Currently, he talks of 8 regions that we used to have in the past. Currently, we have 47 counties. We have constituencies. This public participation was done across the 47 counties, and it was cascaded down to the constituencies. There was also a forum where anyone could send his memorandum through email from any part of the country or even outside. So if we are talking about threshold, I'm not sure about what threshold we are talking about, but from where I sit, public participation was done. And if the public participation will be challenged in court, the way he has put it, it will be the duty of the judge to say what threshold, perhaps if there exists any, will be used. But from where I sit, I know what the Deputy President was doing. And already, if you are very keen, you will realize that Parliament knew that the main obstacle that has always been used in many cases that have been filed against government has been the issue of public participation. So they knew very well, if this thing was to go through Parliament and public participation is not done, that was going to be the first argument in court.
Right.
And that's why they went for public participation. Now, the issue of threshold is another topic that may be decided later on.
Right. Joyce, earlier on you said, you know, from where you sit, if I remember correctly, you said something to the effect to the public participation that was done was quite effective. And so what are the thresholds? Because there seems to be a big argumentative aspect on what public participation is. We've seen it at the corridors of court. We've seen it in Parliament. We've seen it as well amongst, you know, experts and analysts like you. So what, to the effect of public participation, is effective one and one that meets the threshold?
Allow me to take back my brother Wycliffe to Article 10 of the Constitution. And Article 118, Article 10, 2A, and Article 118, 1 and B. When he says, my brother George says that the bill is still at the majority leader, that is revised bill. We already have an article, we already have a section in law that defines what is public participation. The court's later pronounced itself on the principles of public participation. So already that is already determined in law. Among us, the principles that were determined, I can't remember the name of the judge, were four principles of public participation.
Right.
I want to zero in on accountability. My brother Wycliffe has said that public participation was done. But in law, you do not need to itemize only one item and discard the others. It is observing the law in totality. Accountability. Article 118 of the Constitution gives power to the Parliament to provide for public participation. And what does it say? That give information, which they gave through the newspaper. But again, Cynthia, what of the persons who are marginalized? Because this standard only reaches 2 million Kenyans. What they did, the National Assembly printed the questionnaire and put in the standard 2 million. This is assumed it will reach 2 million subscribers, and yet every day around the standard newspaper you will find returns on the papers that have not been bought. It also went to the Nation newspaper and put in questionnaires. How many subscribers read the newspaper? Your guess is as good as mine. So assume it's about 10 million Kenyans that read, that met the threshold of accountability. Cynthia, for the purposes of accountability, the prescribed form must be numbered so that when it comes to tallying, we can tell that Cynthia released 11 million copies, and what came back was 10 million. That series 1 to 3 went to George, series 1 to 10 went to Wycliffe. The rest of the numbers, were those forms digitized? I mean, were those forms numbered? They don't answer me. When they came to the distribution, who was distributing the forms? Were they members of Parliament or were they members of the national employees of the National Assembly? In Teto, a constituency in Nyeri, the honors of distribution of the impeachment forms were given solely to Honorable Eric Wamumbi, who is, who is the area member of Parliament, who which side had he signed, which side was he during the impeachment motion that was filed on Tuesday? He was for impeachment of the deputy president. Yet Cynthia, he is the one who picked literally the forms from the National Assembly and took them to Madeira. From here, between here and to Madeira, these forms are not serialized, Cynthia. These forms are in the custody of George, and George is the petitioner.
Yeah.
Is that how you define fair practice?
No.
For the purposes of Wycliffe, that is not how you define fair practice.
What should have been the fair practice?
The fair practice should have been given to a middle person who does not have vested interest. Let these forms be serialized. Let there be ample time to teach people.
Yeah.
People were only given a notice of only 1 day. If I were in hospital and I wanted to participate in that election, that process, I didn't have time to move from hospital, go to my station at All Karau to go and give my views. Then the time that was given was not reasonable, because reasonable is a principle in public participation. It was not reasonable.
What is reasonable?
It was not open. Reasonable is just reasonable. Reasonable is just reasonable in terms of time, in terms of facilitation, in terms of resource.
How much is reasonable time?
You know, like
Before I lose it.
Yeah, conclude.
Before I lose it, let the public participation be inclusive. The role of inclusivity, where the people living with disability enabled to travel from Sokom Jiga in my county to go to All Karau to go and participate. Were they already facilitated to come from Daragwa constituency to go to All Karau? So the principle of public participation in terms of inclusivity was not taken care of. And what regarding Gachagua, today's legal team, we only narrow down on 4 principles of public participation. Whether we want to be emotional about that discussion now, here where we are seated, or otherwise, there are already loopholes in law. Because it was not inclusive, it was not reasonable, it was not within the time frames, and it was not accountable. We need to give we need to be very fair to everybody, even including to the mover of a motion, Mr. Mutuse himself, who did not have enough facts. When we take facts in raw, he said that the property that had been bought was in Daragwa, yet it is in Kenya West. When you take that, when you possession your fact in the legal corridors of power, it will not be about the move of the motion and what you've heard. It will be the fact that you table in parliament, in court. Finally, before I conclude, Cynthia,
Yes.
there's a lot of things that have been going in this office of either the vice president or the deputy president, historically. We start from the day of Jaramogi Odinga. His stay there was very short-lived, and history has it what happened. So we have a man today here who wants to deal with the jinx that have been there in the office of either the first president during the previous regime and the deputy president, whereby the holder of that office is restricted to freedom of speech, freedom of worship, and freedom of expression. We had him say, and this was mentioned there, when he was in Mombasa during the Gen Z heat, he identified one office of the NIS, which he said had slept on the job. Yesterday, when he was discussing the same, he said he brought in the issue of the September 11 issue, and where you withhold information because you're in power. This is an office that when you're put in that office, you are not supposed to speak. So people today want to see a different matrix altogether. That the previous holders of this office did not have a voice. The holders of this office were not supposed to associate with the enemy. One is supposed to associate with who the principal want to deal with. Now we have brought in a new fight.
Right.
I want to see how this war will go to eventuality, because if the late Baba's father is arrived, would have wanted to see how this job will go. because persons who've been in this office have been intimidated. And when the matter is brought to their face, they are told, kanyagia chini. So I'm happy today that Rigathi Gachagua today is dealing with what the new constitution is availing. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and freedom of association.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Alutalala, weighty issues have been raised on the principles of public participation. What is your response to that?
From where I sit, no weighty issue has been raised here. What is here is that we are coming here with generalities. Because when you talk of the forms were given to MPs, you need to tell us this was wrong. The forms were supposed to be given to MCS, area leaders, or who. When you talk of serialization, now, what happens to those memorandums that were sent by email? Because there was a provision for sending your memorandum through email. When you say that the forms were not, like, they didn't cover, for example, the whole country, because you are saying the Standard newspaper only reaches 2 million people, you should be telling us, instead of having put these forms in the Daily Nation or Standard, because they can only reach to 4 million people, for example, we were supposed to give these forms through what formula? But you know, when you make a claim, it is upon you to give an alternative solution. So for me, from where I sit, as per the current description of what public participation is,
Right.
Public participation was done. And we used, or the parliament used, what is currently available in terms of reaching out to the masses, which is the Daily Nation, Standard newspapers, using the digital platforms, like using email, and these things were all over social media, by the way. So no one should claim that he was never reached by this thing. And even during the public participation, it was being aired live on all TV stations. And today, you cannot tell me that in this country, even in our rural areas, there is power, there is TV, there is radio. So if it is talking about how many people were reached, I can confidently say at least a fair number, which is more than 50+1 of Kenyans knew about this impeachment.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Ngaira, now, something that the Deputy President as well mentioned is that the persons within government who feel Rigathi Gachagua is no longer useful, and that he was used to fight Uhuru Kenyatta to put President William Ruto in power. Essentially, this is a political witch hunt. This is what he says. It's a political witch hunt against him.
Absolutely, and that is in fact what this whole process is about. It's politics, and Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, I'm glad he's very familiar with it. You know, for once, because I've always said that this government and the conduct of this president and this regime must never go unchallenged by Kenyans. It's something that I always say, and any good Kenyan who is a taxpayer and has gone through what we've gone through, for those of us who are in business, small business owners and farmers and people who are struggling, that have a duty, because government of Kenya is not an NGO. It's funded by taxpayers' money, and money that must be accountable by leaders who have integrity. That's the threshold that has been put in the Constitution. We have a whole chapter on leadership and integrity in our Constitution. It's an expectation of the public servants. Right. And for them to spend their time, and you saw the reaction and what Joyce was alluding to, when the first day of the public participation, most of the people who went there, you saw what happened in Bomas, were not even interested in the subject of the matter of the day. They had other issues that they were raising, and you saw how that young girl expressed herself. She said, these people are even limiting our time, yet we have our own problems that we want to be addressed by this government. My issue is this, that I'm glad that Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua understands that this is politics, and he can only handle it politically. That's why he had to do that presser, to allow the public to also get his side of the story before, so that the public can know what these politicians, what these members of parliament, what they're dealing with as far as the National Assembly is concerned. Mwangi Mutuse, we can spend all the time and scrutinize the details of what this process was. Even though we have the legal provisions and some of the precedences that we've had in court, because there are many people who've gone to court and can challenge issues on the grounds of public participation. And many of them have actually been injuncted. You know, it gets an injunction and processes have been stopped. So there's no debate in terms of precedents in courts on as far as public participation is concerned. But we might get to a level where now it's very specific so that we can end the debate that Lutalala is saying about what is really the threshold. Because this is a process that was being administered by the Parliamentary Service Commission, which is being headed by the Speaker of the National Assembly, and the Parliamentary Service Commission actually has representatives in every sub-county. I know, including my own relatives in my constituency, are members of the committee from the Parliamentary Service Commission. Those were the fair probably proponents or who are supposed to pursue this space, and not what the charade that we saw in Bomas, where you saw TJ Kajwang literally policing the whole process, yet is a signatory to the impeachment of this process. How do you expect me to have a fair justice system when you have people that actually want to bury me alive, the ones presiding over the process? In law, and what I was taught, Cynthia, in the constitutional law class in 2005, it's 20 years now, was that he who comes to equity must come with clean hands. Yes. If you come to a system where you're asking for a process to be fair for whoever has moved the motion, he must come in with clean hands himself so that the process is seen that is fair to everybody. They took him to the court of public opinion. He has taken them back to the court of public opinion and let the people decide, because this is a political process. If Rigathi Gachagua, assuming because he's a human being and as human beings we can err, and is part of the presidency, and is seen not to have met the threshold of what is being accused of, then it's an indictment to the entire presidency for that matter. Some of the things that this deputy president has been accused of, the president is worse. If Gachagua is to go tomorrow, then the president is supposed to leave today, because he does not meet most of the things that Gachagua is being accused of. I think Kenyans have an opportunity to do their own assessment today and in the coming days, because this is going through the process. I am just glad, and I was hoping because of what I had mentioned about the 2017 petition of the presidential petition, it gave the Kenyans a chance to see what a presidential petition can be, and that there's a possibility that you can have a positive outcome in that court. What this opportunity has given us, Cynthia, because one day you can become deputy president of the Republic of Kenya. We do not want, however much I like you or don't like you, we do not want to have systems which then are not fair, so that now for the first time that process is being challenged, and by him saying that is going to go through the entire process up to courts, is going to give us and answer the many questions you are saying. What shall be the judicial precedence in as far as public participation is concerned, and then in future then that can be backed by legislation, so that then now we can sit here and say a justified public participation process is, for example, one that is actually conducted at the ward level, because people don't live in constituencies. Your constituency is air. The actual place where people are is in the ward where the village is. Because so whoever goes to court to challenge this process, because he has made it clear he will, and I pray he does, is so that we can define what exactly is public participation, and not take us through a political process for a few people to politically.
I'll add on to that, but for the deputy president to admit that the president has given, or this motion has got the nod of the president, and at the same time say, there are those who feel like he's no longer useful and was just used to bring President William Ruto to power. Where does this leave now President William Ruto and the relationship he has with the deputy president?
Now, first of all, before we go there, my friend Gaira here knows very well that some of the statements he's making are misleading. For example, we know very well that we have one petition today before Parliament, and the petition is about one Rigathi Gachagua.
Yes.
In law and in practice, there is no way you can say that because I'm being accused, even my friend Gaira here, we should go with him. There is one petition at a time. So the issue of if he's now taking that phrase,
just 30 seconds.
Let him respond.
Atikufa makanga, sijui kufa dereva. That cannot apply here. The petition is one against Rigathi Gachagua.
The argument is they were elected as one.
That is okay. But do they these are not Siamese twins. that whatever this one does, the other one is doing.
As he continues,
Let him
so that he doesn't
conclude.
escape
I'll give
me.
an opportunity.
Okay.
Let's deal with the petition that is before Parliament. If Ngaira feels that we need a similar petition for the president, let him bring it. It will also be taken through the same process. But what I agree with him is that, you see, everything that happens in one's life is a learning lesson.
Yes.
And it helps you improve. And actually, if you ask me, as a country, we are doing very well. Some of these things that are happening in Kenya today are not happening anywhere in these African countries. This process that we are now taking, we have seen governors impeached. We have seen many of them go up to the Supreme Court, and judgments have been made. So we know the process of impeaching a governor. Now, for the first time since Kenya became a republic, we are now testing our constitution to see the process of impeaching a deputy president. And you know, the process of impeaching the deputy president is actually the same process that can be used to impeach the president. So we are testing our constitution, which is a good thing. Okay. And there are several lessons that we shall learn from this thing, and they will help us even improve this constitution more, because it will even help us come up with a better bill, like for the issue of this public participation.
True.
Because it has a lot of gray areas, if you ask me. Yeah. Because when you say it has to be accountable, what is the definition of this accountability when it comes to public participation?
Right.
Now, on the issue of when the deputy president says that it is like he was used for political reasons, and is like somewhere in some quarters in government is like his usefulness has been done, and now it is now time for him to be discarded. I think, just like Mr. Ngaira said,
yes,
this is politics.
Yeah.
And in politics, you can never say whether something is true or not. And given the experience of the deputy president and perhaps the information that he has, which some of us may not be having, he may be having a hint of what is happening. And because even in Parliament, you know, you asked some question about how independent are our MPs.
Yes.
You know, if you ask me, if you are an elected member of Parliament, and you say, like what my sister said here, that there is one MP in Nyeri who said yesterday that she was coerced. I think from where I sit, that is someone who was not even supposed to be an MP in the first place.
True.
If you can lose your conscience and say that I was coerced.
Selectively.
Yes, that I was coerced into agreeing to this thing. Why didn't you say no? Then go back to your people and say, mimi nimekataa. So mkisikia chochote, mjue ni kwa sababu nimekataa. But agreeing to sign something, then you come later on to say that I was coerced. Yeah. For me, that is just the highest level of failure on the part of our MPs. But what we need to know, these MPs are elected through political parties. And political parties in this country are owned by individuals. Don't be cheated that political parties are independent. And if you want to know, go through any party nomination. Right. That is when you know that these parties have owners. So that ownership of these political parties, if you ask me, it doesn't end at the elections. It goes all the way up to when you're even in Parliament. That is why you'll always see when there's an issue in Parliament, you hear that Party A is having a parliamentary group meeting to come up with one position. There is no way 120 people can have one position.
No.
Because we think differently. Even here, we are three. But we can't think the same way. So when you hear that the party is doing a PG to come up with one position, it just tells you kwamba there is nothing like independence when it comes to Parliament.
All right. You know, when you listen to the Deputy President Joyce, he kept on repeating the term, the will of the people, I was elected by the people. And at some point he said, you know, he has to prosecute his case before the court of public opinion. Where does he hope, or how at least does he hope that the people will be able to save him or to save his political career?
Rigathi Gachagua is an astute politician. He's on record as the most ambitious and positively ambitious politician. One term, Member of Parliament, Madira, where his principal have been several years member of parliament for about 30 years. Before getting the principal's position, he tarmacked for about 33 years.
Right. Yes.
And this one has only hit 5 years. So this is an astute politician who knows how to measure his ground. And his ground is in what George brought, the opening statement of George was the mobilization of the human resource. Objectively, the DP is looking into 2027. He has no business with it today, the 8th of October.
Yeah.
He has his eyes set on 2027. Because the discussion we had yesterday was not based purely on the 13th Assembly of the National Assembly. It's not about what will happen in the Supreme Court, the High Court, the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. No, it is destined on 2027. What does he aim to achieve? Several things. One, he has come out clean. And a person who repents his sins is there. You know, I'm a Christian.
Right.
I'm hoping you are too. A person who goes to the altar and says, I've sinned, Father, forgive me. That is a person who needs to be taken seriously. Because in the past he has itemized and categorized his sins. That one, I was used to fight my brother. He said this in public. That two, during my fighting with my brother, some goats were stolen from his farm and hold me accountable. You know, this is a person who is sincerely talking from his heart. Three, this is a person who fought his other brothers to bring the kingpin, the current person, the current principal in office. And he stepped on several toes, including the toes of Joyce. Me and George here, we do not vote for him. But today, we can take sympathy on him because he stepped on our toes deliberately, lied to the members of the mountain, and three, gave wrong information. He has come out in the public domain and said, I erred and I gave you the wrong message. Kindly, my brothers, forgive me.
Right.
Anybody for this session, anybody who does not want to put into cognization the fact that Mount Kenya has a huge number of voters will be making a political blunder. So what position leaves his principal in year 2025, next year? He's an enemy of the people of the mountain.
True.
He wants to bring to the public domain that people of the mountain, you have an enemy called my principal. And it is the duty of the principal now to remove that message from the deputy, the number 2, by saying, people of the mountain, I'm not your enemy. It is very, very late now for the principal now to go to place a call to Mutuse and tell him, don't go on. Because already, Rigathi yesterday did a reverse psychology on the movers of that motion and his principal, that now you cannot go back. It's no surrender now. We need to move on. Yeah. We also need to test the institutions that we have. The institution of the legislature, both the National Assembly and the Senate. You also want to test the judiciary and see whether they're independent. He is not doing it for the purposes of Rigathi Gachagua. He is doing it for the purposes of Wajiko and Otieno and Athiambo and Auma. So that Auma can see, is this institution independent or otherwise? Members of public have been left out now to witness the whole joke in terms of these constitutional bodies.
You call it a joke?
It is a joke. Because today what we expect, I do not have a press card to enter into that house, but I will be seeing some smiling faces from the side of the Kenya Kwanza government who are supporting this motion. Yet, what they have is an egg on their face. Because in essence, for you to bring a motion, for you to bring in 11 grounds of impeachment, which are not substantiated enough in law,
right,
then it is an egg in your face. Right. For you to be the head of this country, yes, you cannot read the mood of the crowd. Because those people who went to Bomas of Kenya, allow me to zero into Bomas of Kenya, it was not about Rigathi must go. It was another song, Somebody Must Go. I do not want to mention, because Wycliffe may get mad in this morning.
Right.
Now, ground stand from Number 2 must go to number 1 must go. Growth stand from Kuva Dereva, Kuva Makanga, and Kuva Kamagera.
Yeah.
Because in the Kamagera we have the shareholders of this KK government. This is none other than the CSR himself, Musalia Mudavadi, and another guy, the Papa Aroma, called Wetangula. These are the shareholders of Kenya Kwanza government. This is what Rigathi Gachagua have been calling shareholders.
All right. Speaking of shareholders, allow us to listen to what he said about shareholders now, and then we'll listen to what he said about shareholders 1 year ago. So we can begin with what he said just yesterday evening on the shareholding acclamations.
The office of the Deputy President, Ford Kenya will be allocated the position of the Speaker of the National Assembly, which was given to Moses Wetangula. In accord with Article 2.1 of the Power Sharing Agreement, ANC and Ford Kenya would have a 30% share of national government positions. So, the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, the Honorable Wetangula, and the people of Western, please don't condemn Rigathi Gachagua. The agreement is here, defining your share in the government. It is not me. I did not sign this document. It was signed by Musalia, Wetangula, and President William Ruto. So when I say about this share thing in terms of positions, I've never talked about resources, about development, although it is also here.
All right, so that is yesterday evening, said, Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula signed 30% shares. That was yesterday, and he said it wasn't about national resources, but it was about national positions. Now, let's listen into what he said 1 year ago on Matters Shares.
Sisi lazima tungeangalia nyinyi. Hii serikali ni kampuni na ni ya shares. Si ndio? Ni ya shares. Kuna wenye kampuni, wale wako na shares mingi, kuna wale wako na chache, kuna wale hawana. Sasa nyinyi mliinvest kwa hii kampuni ya William Ruto na Rigathi Gachagua. Sasa lazima mvune. Yule ambaye alipanda atafanya nini? Simulipanda? Simuliamuka mapema? Mukasema mutaki kusikia mambo ya ile system na nini? Muka invest, mukapanda, mukapalilia, mukaweka mbolea, mukamwagilia maji, wakati ya kuvuna ndio huu.
Right, that was 1 year ago. So, Gaira, from where you sit, was this a huge about turn on what exactly he meant on Matters Shareholding?
Cynthia, and I'm glad Kenyans are having an opportunity to be able to separate people that are hypocrites and those who remain truthful to their word. The process of coalition making is actually administered by the Register of Political Parties.
Sure.
And all the agreements that are made by coalition parties are actually deposited to the office of the Register of Political Parties. This president publicly signed those agreements. I was in the village, Cynthia, and during campaigns, and Moses Wetangula in Bungoma County kept reminding our people in Bungoma County and Kakamega as well of the agreement that they have with the president that is going to be 30%, that if the cabinet will have 22, Western will have 30%. That's about 6-7 cabinet ministers. It didn't happen. He told them that if you're going to have 51 state departments, which is the PSS, that Western will have to be able to have 30%. That was the same agreement he had even with Mike Sonko when he came in, and Mike Sonko even showed the documents. He said that when I was pulled out of the governorship race of Mombasa, this is the agreement that I was given by the president in writing. Not just, and it was public. You remember they used to do press conferences and they would show the agreements. That is a clear indication that that government was formed out of a shareholding agreement, that we are going to form this government, and it's in writing usually. What did President Rigathi Gachagua, and that's why I keep saying that I choose to be objective in life. That's why over the years, in the last 30 years or so, I first saw a political campaign choice in 1997. When Omala Kijana was running for his campaigns, I was in school. Sometimes they get young boys to carry the posters and do that. I did that. That was the first time I saw what politics is. Today is 2025, is almost 30 years, Joyce. And I understand what the politics is. President William Ruto publicly, at the time when he was campaigning for this race, had all those agreements with all those people that he's mentioning. Rigathi Gachagua, from that context, is extremely right that indeed this government, there are people who literally signed it and they'll be able to table it. Right. For the benefit of the people in the evening, Rigathi Gachagua will not be speaking to the members of parliament. It's the lawyers, and I've heard some of the lawyers that have been mentioned. Gachagua is a serious prosecutor. I can't wait. I hope it is him. Right. Because then he's able to actually prosecute all these things because it's very true. Right.
Alutalala, what he meant about shareholding, was it on matters sharing national positions or was it on national resources?
You know, my friend Gaira needs to be serious at times and not trivialize very serious issues. Right. These MPs who voted for this, who signed on this impeachment motion, a good number of them, actually like 3/4 of them, were from Kenya Kwanza. And they all understand that Kenya Kwanza government had a coalition agreement. So when they accuse the deputy president of talking about shareholding, they cannot be that naive to assume that they don't know that there was a coalition agreement.
So what is he?
The deputy president has been accused of when he talks about shareholding is totally different from the coalition agreement that we are talking about, which was signed in public, and it is there. The deputy president has been accused severally because of having not been able to capture the aspirations of Kenyans as the deputy president of the Republic of Kenya. Because wherever he goes, whenever he opens up his mouth, he's only talking about his region of Mount Kenya. It is not about the coalition pact that was signed before elections. And Cynthia, we need to be honest with ourselves. Any government comes into power through coalition building. This is not the first coalition, this is not the first government that has come into place through coalitions. In 2013, Ruto had URP, Uhuru had TNA. Right. They merged and formed Jubilee, and there was a pact to that power sharing arrangement. But we never had these issues of, we never had Uhuru every time reminding Kenyans that is representing his Milimak people. So what we are saying is that when elections are held, you must bring people together for purposes of winning.
Is the shareholding remarks divisive?
Yes.
Is the shareholding remarks divisive? From
no. Yes, of course it is. In fact, if you listen to this public participation, one thing that cut across the country, that people were very open and they kept on talking about it, was the issue of shareholding. So what I'm saying is that when an election is held, after the election, the president and the deputy president become figures of national unity. And that is why, even after elections, we saw Uhuru go for Raila. Even after calling him Muganga, after Raila calling him Mulevi, he saw the need to unite the country.
Right.
So we cannot have a deputy president who was elected, he's already in office, but whenever he opens up his mouth, he's talking about his region of Malima.
All right.
That is very difficult.
Yes. All right, I'll come to you. The shareholding remarks, your thoughts in 2 minutes.
I'm happy my brother Wycliffe is choosing what to read in terms of the shareholding.
Yeah.
I'm happy that through his good school, that you only allow the discussion of the shareholding when you're only looking for votes.
Yeah.
But when we go to office, then we do not need to talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm also happy from his school of thought that when we assume office, then the principles and what we agreed during the vote hunting and the shareholding certificate is not lived to. But the Kenya Kwanza government lived to the shareholding agreements. Why? Who was given in the Ford Kenya? Who benefited more? Papa Aroma benefited more. That is the truth about the shareholding. So Papa Aroma is holding a shareholding certificate. Yeah. Whether we hide under the bench, under the saddle or otherwise. Yeah. The ANC, did he benefit from the shareholding? Yes, the answer is yes. Did they nominate persons? Yes. Yes. The CS Health is a nominee of Ford Kenya.
True.
And that is a benefit of the shareholding. The Speaker to the Senate, did he benefit from the shareholding? Yes. He's the Senate. He is a party leader of PAR in Mombasa.
Yeah.
MCC, this is Chap Chap, the CS Reba. So in essence, apparently the only person who did not benefit Cynthia is my brother from the mountain, MK. He was initiating the arrangement of the shareholding, but he was kicked out of the way. You know, when we are suffering from selective thinking and selective taking decisions, it is a precursor for wrong leadership. Wrong leadership entails that what we say during the morning show, what we are discussing today, is what we discuss in the evening. When we are doing the foot hunting, when we went to Western Kenya, it was about the Tawai movement. When we went to the Murima, it was about the other language. I do not want to say because I'm disadvantaged. Members may not understand in this room. So, in essence, I took George because George could go to Maraba and talk to in his mother tongue.
Yes.
Because in his village, not everybody is enlightened, can read and understand the English language or even the Swahili. You've listened to how members from the mountain talk Swahili. It is another dialect altogether. I think it should be added in the national dictionary. My say, Cynthia, is let us be objective in terms of when we want to castigate political dynamism in this country. Let us not discard you because objectively we used you so that we can fight a weak reef. But once when we fought and succeeded in winning this battle, then we kick you out. That is not good. And people are also running their lessons wisely today. We had Morara Kebaso, who came up very, very fast, very high, and today now his stars are going down. Why? Because he did wrong. At times he dined with the enemy. When Wajiko, anybody who is against this Kenya Kwanza government is thinking otherwise. Finally, before I conclude, Cynthia, and I'm sure this will be my last statement. Kenya Kwanza government has had its priorities wrong from day one. Last week, when they wanted to change the suppliers of oil and lubricants in JKIA, they made sure that all the airplanes had grounded. And they said there was a leak. Why? They wanted to change one company to the other. This week, I'm talking from a position of authority. KRA uses a system called the ICMS. Yesterday, Bobby visited KRA and said the ICMS system is outdated. Some time back, people wanted to change the NHIF system, said had a visibility study and said about Kenya sharing 700 million will be used to upgrade the NHIF system. What did some characters do? They brought in a whole story and only decided to use 104 billion Kenya shillings to change the system of NHIF. Yesterday, Buddy, when he visited KRA, he said that the ICMS system is outdated. The insiders from KRA have only said it's about 500 million to change over. Kenya Kwanza government this week will announce now a new partner, strategic partner, to change the KRA system. And I'm sure they are saying they'll say it's about the range of about 200 billion. I'm not a prophet of doom, Cynthia. I'm only objective. But we need to have a government that is accountable, a government that is friendly, a government that is willing to listen to Wajiko. Wajiko has a saying, country use our taxes right. Do not waste. Do not reduce wastage. Thank you, Cynthia.
In 30 seconds, I'd love us to get the final word because we're way out of time. So in 30 seconds,
Kenyans have now an opportunity to interrogate further the quality of the leaders they chose, because these leaders did not drop from heaven. They came in through a political process, and even some of them came in carrying a Bible, and they said that as soon as they drop the Bible, there are these wonderful things they'll do to us. Please make the decisions. My plea is to the Kenyans to make the decisions in a very rational way, so that we can begin to get a sizable number of Kenyans who are able to teach these leaders, starting from the president. Today we're talking about the deputy president, but you know the president too is not above the law, and there's a process that can actually be able to be put in place to question him, because that is a constitutional duty. He doesn't have to get to 2027.
Right. Alutala in 30 seconds.
I think as Kenyans, you have an opportunity today to go deeper into the real issues that are being used to impeach the deputy president. And from where I sit, I think we cannot take what the Deputy President said in his press statement, Jana, as the gospel truth. Because I don't think in my sane mind I can believe that a whole MP and 291 people can say that you have 22 companies which have been trading with government, but in your press statement you say that almost all of them have never been trading for the last 10 years. So I think, as Ngaira will tell you, when a matter goes even to court, when you serve the other party, when the case now goes for full hearing, it is the opportunity to hear from both sides and to go through the documents and the evidence. So as Kenyans, we are waiting now to hear the full story from both sides, from Gachagua's lawyers and from Parliament and the proponents of the impeachment. We are waiting.
Joyce, in 30 seconds.
Kadri, to our big institutions, we appreciate the services that you give to this country, but Kadri, be independent enough. The National Assembly and the Senate Assembly, Kadri, when this matter of Rigathi Gachagua comes to your face, to your desks, Kadri dispense with objective. When it moves to the judiciary, Kadri also the judiciary expedite this matter. This issue of Gachagua is forcing Kenyans to stop what they are doing to deal with other issues like the Adani issue, like the chief and the Shah. Let us be objective in this issue. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, ladies, gentlemen, for your time this morning. On my immediate right is George Ngaira, who's a governance analyst, Wycliffe Alutalala, the center political analyst, and Joyce Wamahi, who's a political analyst as well. Thank you very much, ladies, gentlemen, for your company this morning. I really appreciate your insights. What an important day it is as we wait upon to see what happens at the floor of the National Assembly, the arguments that will be put up in place, and looking forward to have this conversation as well with you, the people, on what your thoughts are concerning this impeachment, whether it holds ground or not. Well, your voice really does matter. So allow me to wrap it up at that point. My name is Cynthia Nanjala. Thank you very much for watching. Have yourself a blessed Tuesday morning.